Well, good morning, everybody. This will be the intern presentations. We had two groups of interns, one working on a tree program, a roadmap to a tree master plan for the city of Los Altos, and the other working on landscape design plans. And that's being mentored by Glenda Chang. So I'm going to let my two interns introduce themselves and then do a slideshow presentation and show the report they wrote. They've done quite a bit of work. They've worked with the subcommittee from the Environmental Commission, and the Environmental Commission is looking forward to the report. So with that, Ellie and Farida, please introduce yourself and take it away.
I'm Ellie. I'm a rising senior at Menlo School, and I was a part of the 500 Trees campaign.
Hi, I'm Farida. I'm a rising junior at Los Altos High School and part of the 500 Trees campaign.
I'm just going to share my screen, and then we have a presentation there.
Roadmap to a tree planting master plan. So I guess we kind of already introduced ourselves, so we can skip that slide.
So this is the agenda for today. This was the set of slides that we presented to the environmental committee. We did modify it a little bit, but we'll briefly begin by talking about our work as interns, and then we'll delve into the elements of a good tree master plan, more specifically, some best practices, community resources, and action steps. And then we'll talk about our takeaways from this internship, and then we'll go through our report.
So as we mentioned previously, we're part of the 500 Trees campaign, and we noticed that Los Altos doesn't have a tree planting master plan, but we do have a 10,000 tree goal by 2035. And obviously we need one to achieve this goal if we're going to stay on track. So we began by researching other master plans, and we also interviewed individuals involved in tree planting activities, city and county staff, as well as other entities to help us figure out what information we should include within the plan and what information would be most helpful to the public.
Okay, now we're going to talk about elements of a good tree master plan, and we did so by researching other master plans from other cities and kind of pulling out the highlights from those. So first, we feel it'd be important to include a bit of background information, just how Los Altos has been using its land. We did find that there are currently around 12,000 trees lining the streets of Los Altos, and this is helpful to know like where we want to go in the future. And then we do have some ordinances in place in regards to like the protection of heritage trees. But later on, we will also propose a couple others that we feel would be important. And then there is a climate action and an adaptation plan that was recently put in place, and we used some of the information from there to help us with our slides.
So the purpose of the master plan, from a high level view, the plan its aim is to support increased canopy cover and sustainability. It does this by doing a few main things, and that is establishing goals over a timeline. And we'd hope this timeline would end by 2035, which was the goal date stated in the climate action plan. We also would hope that it would include an understanding of the challenges that we're going to face to reach these goals. This can include social challenges, environmental challenges, and we'd also hope that it include the benefits that we'd receive by fulfilling these goals.
All right, so here are some of the benefits of canopy cover. We broke them into three main categories: environmental, economic, and social. So canopy cover can provide habitats. It can also enhance property values, and it ultimately just like cools down temperatures.
So goals and the visions. We used a few different documents to collect, or I guess figure out which would be the best goals to surround the whole document around. And these were the 5 we came up with: planting 10,000 more trees by 2035 and increasing water efficient planning. These two, we found them in the climate action plan, and these were highlighted in multiple different sections of the plan. Number 3 is increasing wildlife presence. Obviously, if we're going to be planting more trees, the goal is to increase biodiversity, and not only that, is to create a healthier environment. And a big part of it is increasing wildlife presence. Number 4 is increases species diversity. And we found this in the urban forest resource analysis. This was done in Los Altos in 2016. And through it, we found that the top 3 species in Los Altos have exceeded the 10% suggested rule, which means we're struggling in regards to biodiversity. So it's something we need to look to. Number 5 is increasing community engagement. If we want to reach the 10,000 trees goal, we need to engage the community because of how big the goal is. We need everybody to get involved.
One thing that we found in some other tree master plans was the inclusion of a community survey, kind of building off what Frida said. In order to achieve this goal, we do need the whole community involved. So asking them questions like their view on the importance of trees, potential barriers that are stopping them from planting a tree so we can address them and help solve these issues and encourage them to plant more trees. Recommendations on planting locations, because one of the challenges we have faced is finding good locations because the canopy cover in Los Altos is fairly consistent. So asking people if they know of open spaces to plant trees, including like their own yards. Asking them about city communication and resources. How good of a job is the city doing in providing the resources necessary for individuals in the community, and then their view on tree removals.
So currently there are some funding estimates that were stated in the climate action plan. For example, increasing tree canopy cover would cost around $3.6 million. And we'd hope in the future we can confirm these estimates and make sure that they also include maintenance costs, because it's something that came up over time. As important as it is to increase canopy cover, we're not going to be able to sustain it unless we're taking into account how much maintenance will cost and making sure that we're maintaining the trees we already have. There are some sources that were stated in the climate action plan, for example, CAL FIRE, CA Relief, and CA Natural Resources Agency. But we'd also hope to look into more funding sources just because of how much all of these goals are going to cost to achieve and start moving forward with.
Next would be monitoring. So finding a consistent way to measure our progress. We feel that it would be really beneficial to have smaller benchmarks along the way just to hold ourselves accountable and keep ourselves on track. We did establish that we were measuring net gain for the total number of trees, but there are some considerations that we need to take into account, like the size and the type of tree. Next are some best practices that we found from other tree master plans that we think would be good to include in our own. So first, for the format, we feel that'd be good to include 2 separate documents. We discussed this with city officials, and they also agreed that it'd be good to include a technical version for the staff and developers and a more easily understandable version for the community. Next would be including graphics just throughout, mainly because of like the visual appeal, and it would also be helpful in describing some more like complex issues, and then having a summary on the website, providing like a general overview.
So next is the tree list. Obviously, we're going to need a tree list for the community to know what kind of trees they can plant, what kind of, and where, not only what kind of trees they can plant, where they should plant them. So something we want in the future to be considered is special situations. So like tree lists near a creek, and also distribution lines. What kind of plants can they plant there? Because there are certain restrictions. But something that we looked to was the tree list that the city already has. This is called the street tree list. And we found that it hasn't been updated in a long time, or it seems that it hasn't been updated in a long time, because we found that around 48% of the trees on there are on canopies not recommended list. The California Invasive Plant Council, or Canopies Thirsty Tree List, which indicates that almost half of the trees on there are not appropriate for the city, and there are better trees that can more benefit the city. Number 4 is future goals with specific actions. As important as it is for us to create goals for the future, we're not going to be able to achieve them unless we break them down and figure out certain ways to get there. For example, increasing canopy cover. We saw that in East Palo Alto, which is the one you can see in front of you. They, for example, had a certain goal of public trees that they want to plant each year, and a certain number of private trees that they want to plant each year. And these were some things that we hope we can also include in our own plan.
Next is community resources. This is a really big part of it because once again, we just want to reinforce that the community needs to be involved. And as of now, there aren't really resources that they can use to help them plant trees. So this would answer the question of how the community can get involved and help out. The community tree guide would include where to best get a tree, which trees are the best to plant, where and how to plant a tree, and how to maintain a tree. To do this, we would need to update the tree lists and provide the resources necessary.
So other than the tree planting master plan, these are some steps we hope to for us to work on moving forward. So one of them is the Tree City USA application. So we're not exactly sure if Los Altos meets these requirements, but it would be great if we can look into it to see if we do meet those requirements, because it would be a good way to highlight the environmental work that has already been done in the city and also just bring attention to environmental issues within the city that are still going on. Number 2 is updating the city tree list, as we mentioned earlier, the reason for that. Number 3 is updating the educational resources. So this would not only include updating the website, so the City of Los Altos website, it would also include possibly hosting some community engagement events. Number 4 is figuring out a way to monitor the progress and how are we gonna consider net gain throughout the process. Number 5 is evaluating different funding sources. We can see that in the climate action plan, this has already been done, but we'd hope to look into more funding sources because of how large the cost is. 6 and 7 are some possible ordinances that we think might be helpful to implement in the future. So number 6 is requiring trees as a condition for new development. So this would depend on the zoning of the location, also the size of the location, but it would increase canopy cover because new developments would be required to have a certain number of trees. Number 7 is a mandatory parking lot shade cover. So we found that Sacramento already has one in place. There's required that in 15 years of a new parking lot being built, 50% of it be covered by shade from trees. And we think this would be helpful because parking lots do seem to be one of the only gaps we could find in canopy cover throughout Los Altos.
Lastly, we wanted to talk about some takeaways from the program. First of all, throughout the 6 weeks, we got to talk to many different individuals, and we really enjoyed doing so. And that's why we were able to compile the report. It was because of all their different perspectives and opinions on certain matters.
Also, we learned to utilize the table of contents. We figured out really how important it is because we had to go through documents that were over 100 pages. And there was no way we could get through every single page. And even if we could, it would just be a waste of time. So we had to make sure that we were able to find the right information and properly utilize the table of contents.
Also, we gained a lot of experience about making and giving presentations, learning how to summarize information and present it in the most effective way possible. Here are just some of the sources that we used. We have more in the report itself with links to the documents. We'll briefly show that. It has a lot of the same information that we just presented, but in more detail. So we first created an easy navigation section where you can click on the different parts of the plan and it'll bring you to that section of the document. And as you can see, kind of scattered throughout the plan are links to various sources for more information. And then we also have an appendix at the end of the document with all of the resources that we used, just so we can go back and look, and it's helpful for people to see.
It also includes our notes from the different interviews if anybody wants to look through that.
All right, that's our presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thanks, Ellie and Farida. It's been a real pleasure working with the two of you. And this report is just packed full of good information with lots of links. I think that's one thing the Environmental Commission was looking for, is having something that they could find and get good use out of. It's going to be a very useful document for them, I'm sure. And we're looking forward to presenting it to them. So we can take any questions if you have some now, especially Manny, if you've got something, because you're the guy that's going to be, well, actually, I'm not sure. Are you going to be stuck with trying to implement the 10,000 tree program, or is somebody else going to be doing that?
Yeah, parks and recreation. So that's me.
That's you, okay.
So how'd you know I had questions, Gary? So a couple of things in your research and going into creating the goal. And I know this goal may still be a moving target. I'm not sure where we are, how far along we are with this, but there are certain considerations that we always have when we talk about planting trees. And I think we can probably come to, at the end of my questioning, the biggest one, which would be water conservation. But we're in coming up with that number, were there considerations for root intrusion in our plumbing systems, and also species diversity? Can you tell me what you found about that, and what considerations were made there?
We talked to the Environmental Commission because they were part of the group that came up with this number. And they basically said it was almost a little, basically what they said was initially they wanted to plant 35,000 trees and they negotiated it down to 10,000 trees. But when we talked to city officials, they definitely brought up some concerns about how that's gonna, like if we have enough space for that. Also, the sewage system, we need to make sure that that's not interrupting the roads or anything like that. So I think there are definitely a lot of considerations, and it's possible in the future maybe to create an analysis to see if 10,000 trees are possible within the city given the sewage system and also just the space we have available. So I think that's definitely something to consider for the future.
Okay, and then the other thing that I would probably add to the list of considerations when talking about this is a continual update of the tree list. Not just updating it once and then letting it sit for another 20 years, because obviously the species, we don't want to overburden our species of trees. And just as an example, a general example, I know probably not on the tree list as a pine tree, but if you plant too many pine trees, obviously that beetle is going to go from pine tree to pine tree, and that's why you're seeing a lot of pine trees die. So having similar species or too many of that could affect that. So I think if we continually update the tree list would probably be helpful in the future. And then my final question on that is the big one is water conservation considerations and stuff like that, especially here in California. What have other cities been doing when they talk about if they've created a goal of 10,000, 15,000 trees? What do they do? Because everyone knows that when you first plant a tree that there's more water needed and continual upkeep and stuff like that. With the restrictions in California now, what considerations have they put in place?
I mean, I'm honestly not sure. But I think that one of the things that came up was creating like multiple different tree lists for like the different locations and different like priorities, because everyone has different priorities when it comes to trees. So having like drought tolerant plants is super important, and also having native plants. So just like having these priorities of what trees to plant, not just like randomly planting trees just to reach the goal, but really taking these things into account. I think it's definitely something we're still working on.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
And Manny, just to add a little bit from my knowledge, one area that I've read that others are doing is it's kind of along that lines where we're educating the community to, instead for the water that we're using, instead of using that for the lawns, use it for the trees. So that's kind of what they're encouraging their community to do.
Awesome. So you trade out a lawn for a tree. I think that's a great idea. Now we just got to convince people, right?
Yeah, it's a good segue to our presentation.
Yeah, the water issue is a concern, of course, but the first few years. But eventually, with the right kinds of trees, then the water use goes down. And you have to remember also that trees provide shade that cools everything, and maybe then the rest of the plants don't need as much water. So there's some good benefits that come from having the trees. Plus, just it cools it down for the rest of us on those hot days.
There's actually California Native Plant Society, the Silicon Valley chapter actually has a good tree list program that's continually updated that I've found. And also they have recommendations on to the community on how much water to, like the water usage for new growth of trees, like the first year, how much you need to water, second year, third year, and then when to stop for certain types of trees. So it has that information. You guys should check it out if you don't have it.
Good. I'd like to introduce Arnold and Margie. Hello, they've joined us. We've been doing this internship program now for 5 years, and it started when Arnold was president of GreenTown, and thank you for getting that going. And Margie was involved in the early days too, so thank you both.
Looks like we have also Laura, Gary.
Well, Laura wasn't on the GreenTown group at that time. But thank you for joining us, Laura. She's the chair of the Environmental Commission, so I know Rashina and Carl are looking forward to getting this report.
Not anymore. Bruno is the chair. Tom's the vice chair.
Oh, you're right. I'm a few months out of date. Sorry.
Right.
Well, welcome anyway.
Thank you.
All
Can I
right.
ask a tree question? I
Please.
caught the presentation. I had a quick question that I wanted to ask.
Arnold, go ahead.
In all the work we're doing on trees in Los Altos, is anybody looking at tree coverage gained or lost in the community based on planting and then removing trees that are dead and dying?
I don't think we found any figure regarding canopy cover around the city, except for one in the urban forest analysis that was done in 2016, but that one didn't cover every tree in Los Altos, and it also, I don't think it mentioned net gain throughout, so I don't think so, as far as I know.
Do we know if any other local communities are using that measure to gauge the health of its tree coverage?
Canopy cover?
Canopy cover, sorry. Yes.
Percentage? I think in the other master plans, they did mention like they want to go from, for example, 19% coverage to like 22% coverage. That was mentioned as like a goal in the plans. But I think for us finding our own canopy coverage, I think we could wait because when we spoke to county staff, they said that in a few years, they'll provide us with more information regarding canopy cover, so we don't have to pay money to find that information out. Because they are planning on producing their own plan similar to a tree planting master plan, but for the entire county as like a baseline almost.
Got
Yeah,
it.
that's a good point for Rita. The county Department of Sustainability is working on exactly that question, Arnold. What is the canopy cover? And they've got some way of doing this, of tracking this. I don't know if it's from a Google Earth shot or what, or something a little closer to ground. But
Wait.
they can actually look at the canopy cover and like the survey we did, see what the trees are, identify the trees, even the condition of the trees. It sounds pretty sophisticated, and they got a grant from, I think it was Cal Fire, to fund this. It's millions of dollars, and in a couple of years that information will be available for us, and they've offered it to us.
Does it also
company-
address carbon sequestration? Because the canopy is one thing, but carbon sequestered by these trees is a different thing, and the end of life is important for that as well.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but we are we do say the 10,000 trees is 10,000 net new, but unless you're tracking the things that are lost, it's going to be a little hard to stay on top of that. So it's something to consider.
Yeah. No, I would imagine, Gary, that there's a way to track, at least from the city-owned areas, right? We could track what's lost and identify why the trees are dying, stuff like that. I mean, there's some area that we could track for sure, right?
It can all be tracked. It's just we aren't doing it, and somebody has to step up and fund that. That
Got it.
could be the challenge. Okay, well, thanks again. And now we can move on to the landscape group. Glenda, why don't you start it off?
Sure. Hi, I'm Glenda Chang. I'm also part of the GreenTown Los Altos board, and I'm also the lead of water conservation. I'm very excited to present my team, Nina and Hannah. We are tackling drought tolerant landscapes. We have, GreenTown itself has done some efforts and activities around this area. We do have a woodland library garden. Manny, you should know about that. We recently revitalized that. And we had, for several years now, lawn begun bike events that Gary has been leading. But in this summer internship project, we wanted to focus on how to tackle adoption of conversion to a drought tolerant landscapes, because that's very critical in water conservation in our community. That's a case study that we did, or the interns did, and so I'll let them present what they found. Hannah, Nina, please share.
Can everybody see it? So this is our drought tolerant landscaping internship of 2022 by Nina and Hannah, mentored by Glenda Chang. So hi everybody, I'm Hannah. I'm a rising senior at St. Francis High School. I joined this internship because, well, I've always really enjoyed landscaping and nature, and I thought that this would be a really good opportunity to kind of promote lowering water consumption with style. And my favorite drought tolerant plant is kangaroo paw.
And I'm Nina. I'm a rising senior at Mountain View High School. And I joined this internship to combine both like my passion for the environment with my love of writing and interviewing. And my favorite drought tolerant plant is the Douglas iris.
A little bit of background on kind of drought tolerant landscaping and why drought tolerant landscaping is so important right now. In a article published in, I think, 2015, it was found that 40 to 60% of California's residential water use is used for landscaping. And so what we wanted to do with this project was kind of like lower that landscaping water use. Recently, Valley Water has placed watering restrictions on outdoor watering. So in case you didn't know, it has been restricted to 2 days a week outside of the hours of 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. And there is no watering 48 hours after rain and no activities that cause excessive runoff. So essentially, replacing lawns with drought tolerant plants is an effective way to reduce watering permanently. And native plants can be beneficial because they are not only drought tolerant most of the time, but also low maintenance and provide habitat for local wildlife. Unlike lawns, drought tolerant and native plant landscapes can create biodiversity and attract essential bugs and birds for the surrounding environment.
Yeah, and our major goal for our internship was basically to put together a case study about switching to drought tolerant landscapes, and then also to convince homeowners to make the transition, go through that case study and just generally. And so in order to do that, we have a whole list of things. So our steps or our process, we started with interviewing homeowners who had already gone through the process of transitioning their gardens. And then we researched the local rebate programs. We interviewed professionals, including landscape artists and a Cal Water representative. We wrote up our case study, and then we also updated the GreenTown Los Altos website and added new resources there. And next week, we'll be talking to a writer from the Los Altos Times-Crier, so she can write an article about like our findings and like our case study. And then we also we're creating a handout for the community, and we created a map of drought tolerant homes, which I believe we're gonna either put up on the website or like provide to the Los Altos Times-Crier.
So some of our challenges during this internship were finding the time to meet with homeowners and other interviewees. It was a little bit difficult sometimes. We didn't know kind of like when or like where we would meet and like how things would work out, but it's all good. You know, we figured it out, and even though one time I did get us lost in Los Altos Hills, it worked out. It was all good. Another one of our challenges was kind of applying our findings to a Los Altos audience, and how kind of Los Altos homeowners weren't generally concerned with the price of landscaping. In one of our interviews with Anthony Meyer, he kind of talked to us about how the way to promote drought tolerant landscaping wouldn't be through trying to like avoid restriction fees. It would be more about trying to encourage drought tolerant landscaping as a trend.
Yeah, and then our other challenges were getting specific statistics about homeowners' water usage reduction from like before and after transitioning, just because a lot of the people we interviewed had done it like years prior, and they didn't have the exact sort of difference. And I know we were like reaching out to Valley Water or Cal Water, the Cal Water representative as well, and we were going back and forth there. And so that took a bit of effort. And then our other challenge was finding and meeting with Los Altos Hills and unincorporated Los Altos residents, just because it was easy. Like we had a lot of, the majority of our interviews of homeowners were just from Los Altos. And I think we had like one Los Altos Hills resident that we did interview, and she was really helpful. And I don't know if we were able to cover as much of unincorporated Los Altos as we wanted to, just because we didn't really have the connections there. But I think if we maybe had a little bit longer over time, we could have extended it a little bit further. And then our biggest successes and takeaways. So our biggest successes, obviously completing the case study was a big one. And then updating the Retail Los Altos website. We actually have a meeting tomorrow in which we're just gonna finalize the details, and then it'll be updated very shortly. And then a big one was community outreach. And so that like that covers meeting with Los Altos town prior, and then creating content for the community. We're planning to do library talks in the fall, and add to the EPA's landscape photo gallery, like photos of local drought tolerant like plants and landscapes. And then we also distributed Long Be Gone GreenTown signs for meetings. And our biggest takeaways, I think, from this internship, so drought tolerant re-landscaping pricing like depends on the like a variety of factors, just because it's not like it's not super clear cut. And so that includes the size of the yard, whether a homeowner uses professional help or decides to do it on their own, and like a homeowner's previous knowledge of drought tolerant plants and just landscaping generally. We also learned that rebate programs can be financially helpful, although there are restrictions. So like you have to make sure that your lawn is green when you're applying. It can't be dried out, and other like sort of stuff like that in terms of like how much you have to convert or like the maximum that you can convert in order to get the rebate. And then we also learned that native plants improve biodiversity because they're suited to the local wildlife and require a little bit less attention, which actually some of the local like landscape designers, and a lot of them were really in favor of native plants because of this reason, and because native plants tend to be a little bit more like drought tolerant. And then we also we talked to the Cal Water representative, and his name is Anthony, and he said that now is the best time to replace your lawn with these drought tolerant landscapes, just because we're in the middle of a drought right now. And Cal Water is approving, it's being a little bit more generous with the rebates. And like the person who we talked to, he said that like, although normally like if the lawns are a little bit dried out, they might not approve it, because we're in a drought. They're considering that, and they're being a little bit more lax on that.
So I'm about to take you through kind of some of the media that we've created. So this is kind of this is on the I don't know if it's the left or the right side for you guys. But this Google Maps is going to be kind of where our resident map is. It's actually more than just resident homes. It's 5 residents, and then Woodland Branch Library, the garden outside of Akane, Los Altos Hills Town Hill Garden, and then Rosita Park as well. And our plan is to kind of model it after this explore the little free libraries through Los Altos map that was, I think, published in, I want to say, the Town Crier. So yeah. And then this is what the first 6 pages of our handout kind of look like right now. And as you can see, we kind of have like, it's essentially going to be modeled after what our case study is, except it's going to be condensed a little bit so that it can be a more public facing document. And then we intend to use the GreenTown color scheme to color our handout as well. So, yeah. Thank you so much for listening to our presentation. That's it.
Well, thank you.
Glenda, you're on mute.
No, I just said thank you to both of them. Any questions from the community?
This is Margie. I just wanted to say thank you to both teams. Really wonderful work. For you guys who worked on the drought tolerant landscaping, I love the idea of the map and being able to see where more drought tolerant landscapes are in the community. I'm wondering if there's outreach that you've considered to a greater part of the community to get more people engaged in getting their landscape up on, because I know there are more than what you showed quickly on that map.
So we interviewed a couple of homes, and the people that we interviewed, we asked them if we could put their homes on the drought tolerant map. So that is why we only have about 5 residents. And we just weren't sure who else we could ask.
I mean, maybe we could reach out through the GreenTown newsletter to see whether or not there are other people who have, and through the Town Crier, asking if other people would be interested in getting on the map. So as part of your interview with the Town Crier, maybe you can ask them if they do some outreach to the community to get a bigger swath of participants.
Yeah, good question, Margie. I've already reached out on the newsletter last month, but there's also another local group, the Growing Native Plant Garden Tour. Their tour, they have a tour every year in April, and they have a lot of examples in the community, including Los Altos and Los Altos Hills, that showed, houses that haven't, that went from lawn to native gardens. And we plan to also use that as a footnote for there. It doesn't have an address, but it has a lot of examples that we could follow and could be useful for the community.
Laura put a note in the chat too, Glenda.
Yeah, I know that there's been some discussions between some, I don't know who in Greentown, but yes, the Community Foundation, we certainly want to replace the front lawn and maybe the back if we can figure out a good service. But, we just, yeah, we're strapped in terms of our staffing to be able to manage it. So yeah, I think it would be a good demonstration spot since it's right there on Hillview. So any and all help we can get would be, I think, greatly appreciated.
Laura, I've heard about it from Chris and also from Suresh. So I look forward to hearing more and when we could kick it off.
Awesome. Thank you.
Will these maps that show the different spots where people can go take a look, will there be a plant list provided as well?
I don't think so, but some of these places do, I think, have their own plant lists. Like I know that the Woodland Branch Library has like a little QR code that you can scan when you're there. I think they also have like something on iNaturalist that you can look at for a plant list.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of it through the bike tour, Gary, there was a plant list that was provided when we wrote it up as a blog. So it is there. We just need to kind of, connect the links or the information together.
Yeah,
So there,
make it easy so people can get
Yeah.
that, because that could be useful. They go to a house and they see a plant they like, they want to know what it is, because then I can go home and plant it myself.
yeah. And by the way, the maps and this case study, it will be a living document, meaning we'll make several revisions to it as we learn more and as we hear more and as we, we'll continue gathering more information on who has adopted things, adopted the conversion. So we'll keep doing that as we go.
One other quick question I had was, do we have a sense, so we have data maybe from 2011 to 2017 of landscape rebates. I know that data is available more recently too, but I was tracking the data prior. And I'm just wondering whether Hannah and Nana, you guys have gotten a sense from Cal Water and others, given the barriers to the rebate process, what percentage of conversions it goes through that process, the landscape rebate process?
So actually, I think most of the residents that we talked to did go through the rebate process. I think there might have only been like 2 people who didn't. And I think when we talked to Anthony about kind of like their rebate process, they said that they're actually trying to make it like a lot easier for people. So I think now, like if you like sign up and like make an account, like it'll walk you through like all the steps that you need to do. He showed us some of like the applications, like you have to just like, I think like fill out some paperwork on like the numbers, like how big your yard is and like kind of what you're gonna do, and then like upload pictures and then like send them your plan and stuff. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I mean, it sounds anecdotal. You found that most people did go through the rebate process. I'm wondering if there's any more, information on that from Santa Clara Valley Water District, but that's helpful. Thanks.
Yeah,
I think that would be a little bit difficult to like tell, just because like they would only have the data from the people who did do the rebate program. But Anthony did, like, the process was like very straightforward. So like basically they did have you like submit like a very basic plan, and like people, like he said that people like use crayons to mark it up even. So like you didn't have to do anything fancy, you didn't have to like get a landscape designer or anything. And from there you like they have like a list of plants, and you have to like choose a certain amount, and it'll tell you how much like square footage it uses at. So it's like, it's a very like simple process. If you were saying, like, they tried to simplify it a lot. And so basically, like, as long as, if you want the rebate, you can basically get it. As long as your lawn is like in the right condition.
Right.
And that's really the big takeaway here, is the process itself, that it's not cumbersome, and it shouldn't be one that would slow you down in doing the conversion. And one of the, I think, Margie, you asked like, how are we going to make the awareness? And I believe one of the other things that Hannah and Nana will eventually do in the fall is the library talks for more community outreach. And this is where we want to use that, and also the handouts that they're going to be creating when we do community outreach. We want to make sure that the awareness and of that it's straightforward, it's not too cumbersome. I think we should let the community know, so there'll be more adoption.
Yeah, that sounds great. And Hannah and Nana, one other option for mapping tool, you're looking at the free library example, is the one that Arts Los Altos has on their website, where they have a collection of different areas where they did art, and then there's a nice picture and description of it. So you might want to just check that out too.
One of the barriers to the Cal Water rebate is, I believe it's 90 days. You have from start to finish, you have to.
Yeah,
Once you
so we
start
did
the
talk
process,
to,
you have to complete it within 90 days. That seems awfully tight.
so when we talked to Anthony, he said for most people, that's pretty feasible. Unless it's like, so Cal Water does do exceptions to that. But he said that like they don't advertise it that much, but like if it's like someone who is not really getting professional help and is just like doing it on the weekends by themselves, you know, like a couple or something. If they're not really getting professional help, then that's like when Cal Water tends to make those exceptions and extend that time period. And they extend it for, I believe, was it 30 days, Hannah? At a time.
Oh, is that right?
And up to, was it like 2 times? 3 times? Yeah.
2 times?
3 times, I believe, right,
3 times.
Hannah?
Another month.
So technically, like it can be extended, but I think they do want people to get it done in that time period as much as they can.
Okay.
Yeah, those and like making sure, I mean, that other restriction about, you know, that the lawn should be green. I think there's several things that they've already laxed their requirements and that needs to get out.
All right.
Can I ask a question? In talking to Cal Water, was there any discussion about water meters? And usage measurements and that kind of stuff?
There was not a lot of talk about water meters because our talk was focused mostly on the lawn to garden conversion and rebates program. However, I think Cal Water did do a presentation on kind of like all of their rebate programs at an environmental commission meeting. And he did talk about how the smart meter, they were like trying to like implement it a little bit more or something.
Yeah.
Could I
Yeah.
also suggest that when you do your presentations, your library talks, that you discuss how much residential landscape watering uses of the total California water budget, rather than just 40 to 60% of residential water. I think seeing the big picture for people would be very helpful.
So there is a, Arnold, there's a,
most of the total water budget goes to agriculture, so.
But it's just an interesting statement. I realize that, but you know, there are a lot of statistics that people don't realize, like 20% of all power used in California is in moving water.
Right.
So just giving people the big picture about this. That's all.
Yeah, and just to follow up on the metering thing, I think I'm trying to recall exactly what Cal Water said about metering, but I know one thing they did say was that the Flume, which is this do it yourself installation add-on device, that they are available to Cal Water consumers. And I'm trying, I don't remember exactly how much, if they were free or discounted, but
I thought it was $50. It's a discounted price and they're available. And it's just a strap-on device that somehow magically measures the water flow through your pipe.
Great, thank you.
And I've been told it's very accurate. It can spot a drip leak.
Yeah. I know that Persima Hills Water District, they're a little bit more advanced than Cal Water and their metering. And I am urging Cal Water to do more of that stuff too. So we have some back channel discussions.
So I enjoyed the comment that one of your fellow from Cal Water said about, let's make this a trend. It's not just about saving water. It's about the natural environment, encouraging the birds and the butterflies, because, you know, that's a very good point. When you see a bird or hear a bird, you feel good. When you see a butterfly, you feel good. So it's good for our mental health. Let's get that trend going. We want that to happen.
Gary, what was that Daniel Stevens said from the Google Trees? He says biophilia, right? Increasing that biophilia effect.
Okay, biophilia. We love nature.
There was a question Arnold has from Arnold. Has Foothill College Environmental Horticulture Program been contacted?
No, it has not. We have not contacted them.
Is there anything interesting here, Arnold, that we need to follow up?
Well, I think it's an important resource, right? Because they're training gardeners and you can actually contract with them to have work done if the project is large enough. And these gardeners will stay in the area and continue working. So there's got to be, it's worth at least exploring, especially like when the community foundation needs help in converting. Maybe they could turn that into a project.
Okay, good. We'll take note of it.
And they might also be a good place to go for future tours to see what's available, because they've been doing this for a long time. I haven't personally been there, but it seems like it's worth a visit.
Okay.
Yeah, they do have excellent tours of water conservation and drought tolerant plantings that they have implemented at Foothill College. And Vicki Moore, founder of Living Classroom, was trained there, actually.
Yeah. Okay, I see the connection now. If there's a particular person that you want me to contact, I appreciate it.
I don't have any personal contacts. I just went to their website. So
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. I just want to add as a final note, I guess, I think working with the summer internship program is one of the highlights of the year for us. It certainly is for me. So
could I ask Gary, could I ask one more question if we have a minute?
we have a minute.
Okay. So at the end of your internships, my interest has always been in what things you noticed or what skills you acquired that are going to help you in life or getting through high school or applying to college. And I'd love to hear those comments about how you'd be able to apply those things you learned in the internship program to other parts of your career.
Who wants to jump in on that one? I think
I'll
Frida,
start
you,
us off, if
Frida
that's
and Ellie,
okay.
you mentioned that in your report a little bit.
So for me personally, it was a really good opportunity to get to know kind of like my community members more. I kind of hadn't really realized like how involved some of like my neighbors were in these programs. Like as I got to interview a lot of homeowners, like I kind of realized I was like, oh, like these people are only like 5 minutes away from my house. Like I could walk there. So like I thought it was really cool. And I think the biggest takeaway I can take from this is that like the community is like really open and everybody just wants to help each other out.
Great.
It's
Anybody
good to
else?
hear.
One of the things that I took away was how important it is to talk to like many different types of people, because we really did get the chance to speak to some very interesting people. And a lot of our report was culminated from like the different ideas of these individuals. And so it was definitely like a joint effort. So that was really nice.
Yeah, I agree. Even for ours, we talked to just so many different people, and obviously a lot of them were homeowners. They all had transitioned to drought tolerant gardens. All their gardens are so different, and like their process and like their thinking behind it. That was also so different, like between all the people. And so it's really interesting to see how all of those like different perspectives could like lead to like the same sort of thing. And just like seeing, I guess, like everyone's motivations. We talked a lot to like our homeowners about like why they wanted or like why they got interested in drought tolerant landscaping and why they decided to like transition their lawn. And I think that was really interesting because like the human aspect of that is so important to like figuring out how to reach other people.
Good point. All right, I think that's going to be a wrap. Thank you again. Appreciate all your hard work, and thank you to the audience for attending. Bravo.
To you all. Thank you.
Gary, before you all go, I do want to thank both Gary and Glenda for really putting in a lot of time with the interns to make this pretty successful. I'm being impressed by the depth of the research by the interns. I'm pretty sure this will not be possible without your time and commitment. So I really want to thank you both for a great internship, and looking forward to doing this again next year.
Indeed.
Yeah. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.